So St. Patrick was a Romanized Celtic Britain. So remember, Britain, like most of Western Europe, was originally Celtic. It was conquered by the Romans. Now, the Romans never conquered Ireland. They took one look at the weather, and it was so bad they assumed it was winter all the year round. So they called it Hibernia, the land of winter. In fact, Ireland has a temperate climate. It doesn't get particularly cold in the winter, but neither does it get particularly warm in the summer, and it rains all the time, you know, all the year round. Or put another way, in Irish history, many were cold, but few were frozen. So Ireland became Christian without becoming Roman. So when the Roman Empire collapsed and Europe entered the so-called Dark Ages, Christian civilization continued to flourish independently in Ireland, and that's why the Irish were later able to re-Christianize much of Western Europe. But anyway, let's leave that and talk a little more about Trinity College. This is Ireland's oldest university, founded in 1592 by Queen Elizabeth I of England for two main reasons. One was to train administrators for the expanding English colony in Ireland, part of the reconquest. The second reason was to train religious ministers for the newly established Protestant state church. Now, the Protestant Reformation started in Germany when Martin Luther objected to various abuses within the Catholic Church. Now, by the way, relatively minor by today's standards. We'll come back to this other issue of clerical sexual abuse a bit later, which is a huge scandal here, as it is elsewhere, of course, but I'll talk about that later. In Luther's time, it was the mere selling of indulgences for cash that was the problem, but it split Christendom down the middle. Now, interestingly, Henry VIII, the King of England, he initially condemned Luther. He sided with the Pope, and that's why the Pope gave Henry the title Defender of the Faith. And that's still one of the official titles of British monarchs to this day. Now, that's in spite of the fact that a few years later, Henry VIII ran into some marriage problems. It's a recurring feature of the British monarchy. But I presume you've all been watching The Tudors, that very historically accurate TV miniseries. That was all filmed in Ireland, by the way, and nearly all the actors are Irish, so it's a bit like a cowboy movie where all the cowboys are played by the Indians. But it's kept a lot of actors in work, I can tell you. But anyway, so Henry VIII wanted to get rid of his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. He wanted a divorce, but the Pope wouldn't allow it. So not only did Henry get rid of his wife, but he got rid of the Pope as well. So he split away and he established the Protestant Church of England. Now, he also established a Protestant Church of Ireland. So these were Anglican or Episcopalian Protestant state churches. A similar thing happened, of course, in Northern Europe and Denmark, Sweden and so on, where state churches were established. Now, the Church of Ireland, this Protestant Episcopalian church, it was disestablished. We don't normally get heavy works like this here. Anyway, the Church of Ireland was disestablished in 1869, so there has been no state church in Ireland since then. But it's still called the Church of Ireland, which is a bit confusing for visitors because most Irish people are Catholic, over 90% in this part of Ireland. Yet the Catholic Church is not the Church of Ireland, as you might assume. And you'll also notice that none of the old churches or cathedrals are Catholic. They're all Protestant, all Church of Ireland, because they were all taken over at the time of Henry VIII's Reformation. You won't find, and that goes for like both Christ Church and St. Patrick's Cathedral here in Dublin, the two medieval cathedrals, not Catholic, Protestant Church of Ireland. Anyway, what they've been doing, by the way, just to explain, the whole square was cobbled, but they started putting in these nice flat bits here, you know, which is terrible because it was a great sport for years, you know, as a student, watching women, you know, basically, you know, fall off their high heels as they walked. No, I shouldn't say that. But especially in the 70s, you know, the platform shoes were in fashion. This was a death trap, you know, kind of walking across here. I presume they must have had a few lawsuits, so they finally decided to put in a nice flat. Now, where was I? Yes. So now you won't find a Catholic church or cathedral more than 200 years old. And that's a legacy of the penal laws, anti-Catholic laws enacted from the time of Henry VIII onwards. So Catholics weren't allowed to build proper churches or cathedrals, Catholic land ownership was restricted, Catholics couldn't vote, sit in Parliament, practice the law, set up schools, bear arms, enter Trinity College. Catholics couldn't do anything except draw water and hew wood. So this was like a form of religious apartheid designed to keep the British colonial elite permanently in power. Sorry guys, we're nearly finished here. Now the London government faced an unforeseen military problem with these laws. And that was that if Catholics were not allowed to bear arms, and that was a security measure, by the same token, neither could they be recruited into the British military. So as the military needs of the British Empire expanded, the London government looked longingly on these able-bodied papists in Ireland, and they gradually then began to trade Catholic rights in return for Catholic recruits. So by the time of the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, when Napoleon was defeated, about 40% of the Duke of Wellington's British army were in fact Catholic Irish. Wellington himself was Irish, Protestant, Anglo-Irish. Although he didn't like to admit it, he once declared in the British Parliament that, quote, just because you're born in a stable doesn't mean you're a horse. Daniel O'Connell, an Irish MP, shouted back, yes sir, but you could be a donkey. So there was uproar. So, by 1829, as a result of O'Connell's agitation, which we'll talk about later, all of these anti-Catholic laws had been repealed. But as we know from elsewhere, for example, slavery was abolished in the United States in the 1860s, but it was another century before full civil rights came on board. So just because you change the law doesn't mean you necessarily eliminate the prejudice. So you can see the roots, say, of the Northern Ireland problem at the Catholics' lowly social status, but we'll come back to that again a little bit later. So by the 1790s, Catholics were admitted to Trinity, but the Catholic bishops didn't approve. They wanted their own Catholic university, and that's the origin of the other big university in Dublin, University College Dublin, or UCD, which is now on a modern campus on the south side of the city. It was the Catholic university in its origins. Trinity was a Protestant one. But up until 1970, if you were Catholic and if you wanted to come to Trinity, you had to get special permission from your local bishop. And if you didn't, you were excommunicated. So if you died, you went straight to hell. So it's only the last 40 years or so that this university has fully reflected the religious makeup of society at large, which in this part of Ireland is overwhelmingly Catholic. But nowadays, neither of the two universities cares what your religion is, as long as you have the money, of course, like everywhere else. Now, women were first admitted to Trinity in 1904, and the provost at the time, the man in charge, was George Salmon. That's the white statue there behind me.
We saw it.
Now, Salmon cannot claim credit for the entry of women, which he bitterly opposed. In fact, he said women would enter college over his dead body. That's exactly what happened. The day the first woman entered, he had a heart attack and he died. Serves him right.
I like that.
Now, just before we move on to our next stop, just one or two clarifications and reminders. This is the start of a 2-hour historical walking tour of Dublin. If you want to ask any questions at any stage, if you disagree violently with something I say, feel free to intervene. Irish history is an argument without end. Now, it costs €12, 10 for students and seniors, but we sort out the money and the tickets and all that a little later, vouchers, all that sort of stuff. If you have any problem hearing me, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
If you can hear me here, you can hear me anywhere on this tour, believe me. So I think we're okay. But if you have a problem, just let me know and I can shout a bit louder or use sign language or whatever. Now, a couple of things on safety when we're out in the street. Number one, especially we've a largish group here today, so keep your eyes peeled for